The sea was gray that morning, heavy, restless, and cold. Landing craft rocked violently as waves slammed against steel. Inside, young soldiers sat shoulder to shoulder, helmets low, rifles clutched tight. Most were Canadians, many of them barely in their 20s, silent except for the occasional nervous breath. Somewhere behind the planning tables, weeks earlier, a phrase had been whispered with a mix of respect and disbelief. "Leave it to the psychos." It wasn't meant as an insult. It was a nickname born from reputation. A reputation earned through brutal fighting in Sicily and Italy, where Canadian units pushed forward when others stalled. They were known for stubborn determination, aggressive assaults, and refusing to quit once committed. Now, on Juno Beach, that reputation would be tested more than ever. Far away from the surf, Allied commanders studied maps covered in red lines and casualty estimates. Every beach on D-Day carried risk, but Juno was something else. Intelligence reports warned of strong defenses, seawalls, mines, hidden machine gun nests, and heavily armed positions overlooking the sand. Many expected the Canadians to face one of the hardest landings. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the Supreme Commander, needed reliability. There would be no second chance once the first wave hit. Timing between all Allied beaches had to stay precise. If one section failed, the entire invasion could unravel. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery agreed. He believed the Canadians possessed something rare: calm aggression. They moved fast once the attack began, faster than many planners predicted. And on a day where hesitation could mean disaster, that trait mattered. Back on the landing craft, the soldiers didn't hear those conversations. They just felt the engines slow. The ramps hadn't dropped yet, but everyone knew it was close. Some checked photos hidden inside their jackets. Others stared at the floor, lost in thought. One young soldier later said it felt like the world had gone silent, even though the sea screamed around them. The officer at the front shouted over the engine, "2 minutes!" Explosions thundered in the distance. Smoke already rose from the shore. The first waves were hitting. A veteran near the front laughed quietly, not because it was funny, but because fear had nowhere else to go. "Guess this is why they sent us," he muttered. When the ramp finally dropped, chaos exploded. Machine gun fire tore across the water. Men jumped into surf deeper than expected. Some vanished instantly beneath waves loaded with gear. Others pushed forward, struggling through obstacles and incoming fire. But something unexpected happened. Instead of freezing under the storm of bullets, the Canadians kept moving. Fast, almost reckless, exactly as planners hoped, or feared. Officers screamed for momentum. "Don't stop on the sand!" Small groups formed naturally, breaking through gaps, improvising routes around destroyed vehicles. Engineers cleared paths while riflemen pushed inland. Every second mattered, and somehow the line didn't collapse. From observation points, German defenders watched in shock. The attack was supposed to stall in the surf. It didn't. By mid-morning, the Canadians were already deeper inland than many predicted. Their advance began linking with other Allied units, a crucial step in preventing isolation, but the cost was visible everywhere: burning equipment, empty helmets in the surf, medics working without pause. One officer looked back toward the sea and whispered, "They actually did it." The day was far from over, and the hardest fighting was still waiting beyond the beach. Yet one thing had become clear: the gamble worked. And somewhere in the command chain, the decision to trust the Canadians at Juno Beach suddenly made perfect sense. The sand was behind them now. What remained of Juno Beach burned under black smoke, but the Canadians were already pushing inland, faster than anyone expected. Radios crackled with confused reports. Units meant to regroup were still fighting near the water, yet other companies were already advancing through villages and open fields. German defenders watched through binoculars in disbelief. The landings were supposed to stall at the shoreline. That was the plan. Pin them down, break momentum, counterattack. But the Canadians didn't stop. Small groups formed naturally, moving from cover to cover, clearing resistance pockets one by one. Every minute they gained increased the pressure on the entire German defensive line. In one shattered village road, an officer waved his men forward while artillery thundered in the distance. Houses burned, windows shattered, and dust filled the air. Civilians hid in cellars as gunfire echoed between stone walls. Yet the advance continued. Some soldiers later said it felt less like a planned attack and more like survival through motion. If they stopped, they would become targets. Behind the front lines, Allied command posts began receiving updates. Canadians advancing beyond expected line. Then another message: advance continuing. Resistance strong but scattered. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery reportedly paused when he saw the map updates. The timing didn't match predictions. The Canadians were pushing deeper than planned for the first day. A dangerous achievement, because outrunning support could leave them isolated. But slowing down wasn't an option. German reinforcements were already moving toward the coast. Every kilometer gained now could decide the fate of the entire invasion. Near a road lined with broken trees, machine gun fire suddenly erupted. Soldiers hit the ground. A tank crew maneuvered forward, shells exploding against hidden positions. Smoke rolled across the fields, turning the world into shadows and flashes of light. One young soldier crawled forward beside his friend, both exhausted, uniforms soaked with sweat and sand. They didn't speak, only nodded when the signal came. They moved again. By afternoon, something unprecedented was happening. Canadian units were linking objectives faster than planned. Engineers cleared roads, infantry secured crossroads, and momentum kept building. German defenders who expected exhausted attackers instead faced relentless pressure. Some positions surrendered quickly. Others fought until overwhelmed. A German officer later described the feeling as waves that never stopped coming. Back at command level, the gamble became clear. The decision to trust the Canadians at Juno Beach, the ones described as aggressive, stubborn, almost reckless, was no longer just a strategic calculation. It was working. But success carried a cost. Medics struggled to keep up. Casualties mounted. Every push forward left behind reminders of what the beach had demanded that morning. Soldiers paused only long enough to catch breath before moving again, driven by orders and instinct. As evening shadows stretched across the French countryside, the Canadians finally received the order to consolidate positions. They had gone farther inland than any other Allied force on D-Day. The radio message was simple: hold what you have. Exhausted men collapsed beside hedgerows, listening to distant artillery and wondering what tomorrow would bring. Some laughed quietly in disbelief. They were alive. Others stared silently toward the darkening horizon. The first day wasn't the end. It was only the beginning, and somewhere among Allied commanders, one thought quietly spread. Maybe they really were the right choice for Juno Beach.